Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Ho. Jennifer was a corporate economist for a large multinational company until she got physically sick, migraines, depressions, etc., from toxic exposure and watched her life fall into effort and struggle. She then traveled the world and worked with scientists, doctors, mystics, and spiritual leaders who collaborated the tie between our vitality, our abundance, and our ability to flow and the laws of physics. Her relentless journey to fully heal showered her with the understanding that relationships of physics to life not only affected her health but also her finances, business, energy, and communication. She became passionate about developing leading edge systems to assist her clients to achieve quantum results and quantum leaps in all areas of life. So, Jennifer ran the largest nutrition practice in Canada for 10 years. She's a founding member of Evolutionary Business Council and member of the Wisdom Council for the EBC. Jennifer, welcome on board. And your topic for today is mastery of living in consistent overflow of energy, health, and abundance. Over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much.
Best wishes, Jennifer.
Thank you,
Have
Dr.
a great time.
Ugandar. So
Thank
lovely
you
to
very
see your
much.
smiling face.
Thank you very much.
And the place I want to begin is with thanks for what you've put together here, and thanks for beautiful Harrison for making powerful connections with you across the ocean and across the world. I'm just really touched by the heart and the genius that's here today, and that's here. I know so many of these names, and I can just feel it's like we're dropping this gorgeous love bomb on the planet, and it's just such a blessing to be here. So thank you, Dr. Ugandar. And
Yeah, the love bomb is blasted already.
yeah, I think so. So shall I just jump in?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ugandarji. So, all right, you guys. I was listening to our first group of inspirers, connectors, love bomb droppers. And as I was presenting myself to the energy and the generosity of what was being paid forward, I became a little verklempt, moved by what I can feel within my own body is possible. I know with everything that's going on in the world, the one connector right now is a little tiny virus. And I thought to myself, it's so easy to contract, isn't it? But also look at how easy it is to expand into what's possible. We can contract when we focus in one place, and we can at the same time focus on something else and expand into what's possible. And so, gosh, overflow. Why did I even pick that as a topic? Because we are either as humans surviving or thriving. And in the place, and let me define what I mean by surviving. In survival mode, we're very much about ourselves. We're very much trying to figure out how we can we even imagine that there's a piece of the pie. And in fact, all there is a pie, and there's nothing other than a pie. We imagine in survival, and you might even want to think about some of these statements that I'm making and see how often in a day you might fall into these categories, or even if you're living there a lot of the time, you might want to make little check marks. See how many of these might be true for you in survival mode. In survival mode, we feel as though we're alone. We feel as though there's a very limited pie, and we have to fight for our piece of that pie. We feel as though by the end of the day, we're spent. There's no extra energy. It's done. We feel as though we have to do it ourselves. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? That's survival mode. Survival mode, by definition, puts us in a place where we consider that we are single journeyers on this planet, in this universe, and that we are solo. We have no help, and we might read a book or two and read about some steps that somebody might have created. But of course, we forget that those are the steps that they created. They may catalyze some inspiration. But survival, by definition, puts us in a place where we're not connected to our own innate wisdom. We're not connected to all of the wisdom that's come before us, that exists in a thought field, in a metaphysical space where all the answers to anything that we might have a question for already exist. Because as soon as we say, I'm interested in surviving through our actions, through acting like we're alone, what we do is we plug into the world and listen, consciousness, God, the universe. I am going to presume that I'm going to include all different kinds of relationships to creation, or words that we can have for creation. Consciousness, creation, the universe, whatever you want to call it, God, is accessible to all of us at the same degree. Nobody's special. We were all creation's good idea. We were all the dream of consciousness. If that's so, then we all have the same amount of access to that infinite wisdom. And we're loved equally. Now, here's the punchline. We're so loved that if we actually declare our lives to be in survival mode, we are so loved that consciousness will actually deliver us survival mode. And we will live in the illusion that we're actually surviving and that this world and this universe is limited. However, thriving, and the reason why overflow became my topic, is because thriving can only take place when we consider that we are not alone. That in fact, in 3 dimensions, we have 2 eyes, a nose, and 1 mouth, 2 ears. We have ways of taking in vibrational, waveforms through our 3-dimensional sensors, so we can see beautiful things like sunsets. But we also have 75 trillion cells, give or take. The 75 trillion cells of which take in photon packages of light and also give off photon packages of light. The photon packages of light of which carry information from consciousness that we are receiving at trillions per millisecond, meaning that which we need is being offered to us through 75 trillion cells, millisecond by millisecond. So when we say we're alone, we're really alone in our mind. But when we decide we want to live in overflow, we start to understand that we have 75 trillion cells connected to greater wisdom, connected to the field of consciousness. That consciousness is actually delivering us answers to all of the questions that we have ever asked, and even answers to questions we haven't even asked. So let's say the metaphysical explanation for how loved we are, the biological the biological explanation for how adored we are, is that we have 75 trillion cells, not 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. We have 75 trillion cells that are able to pick up on information that transcends the limitations of 3-dimensional communication, where we actually have to listen to very confining words and trying to understand with our mind, when we could actually take in the information at a quantum level, information of which we can experience, which is a much faster way of remembering how blessed we are, such that we can live in overflow. Now, God, creation, the universe, thought that your spirit, with all of its experiences and every lifetime you've ever lived, every skill set you've developed, consciousness and its innate wisdom, thought that in a time of great change right now, that your spirit, your soul pouring through this very specific body, whether you're a man or woman in India or in Canada, wherever you are in the world, that specific combination of skill sets, body type, family you are in, and your innate genius should be here right now to build bridges in times of great change. That's no small thing. You know, if we were to pretend that there was time and space in that universe, we could say that in that reality of time and space that, you know, the universe could have created a star system or a galaxy or a rainbow or a new species. But in these times of great change, all of consciousness, infinite wisdom that is all seeing, all knowing, omnipotent, omniscient, decided that you were a good idea, decided that I was a good idea, decided that us coming together as we are right now was a good idea, decided that Dr. Ugandhar should have a dream that we should all get together. And here we are. This, in fact, is overflow. Because right now, in this conversation, in all of these beautiful conversations, we are not in survival. We are actually in an overflow of what's possible. Now, I wanted to put this into practical terms because I only have about 5 more minutes. So in practical terms, I wanted to describe this to you in a let's call it in terms of physics, in a scientific sort of way. If you can imagine that at the foundation of each of us, at the metaphysical foundation, we have a body. Hopefully you guys can all see this. It's a little bright, but I just drew a picture of a person, a very tall, skinny person. And imagine that we all have a central metaphysical channel that's a spiral. And that spiral is part of why we have life and energy. So imagine that consciousness, in order to have us have a life and have the energy to live, because we were made in its image, we're here as creators. So imagine that spiral keeps spiraling as we be curious about our life and as we be creative. So I'm giving you the clues about what it takes to live in overflow. It requires that we be very childlike. So the first principle of being childlike is curiosity. The second principle of being childlike on the adventure is that it's an adventure. That it's an adventure and curiosity. And then in fact, the goals that we have are just an excuse to go on the journey. Because remember, as creators are simply made in the image of creation, and creation wanted to understand itself through its creations, us. So goals are just things that we set in order to cause deeper understanding of ourselves in a gorgeous quantum feedback loop that goes back to consciousness, then understanding itself deeper through our lives. And by setting goals, we have these amazing ahas and these amazing abilities to let go of what's stopping us. So a toroidal field is when we have a toroidal field is a self-perpetuating mechanism that will give us whatever we want. And if we're childlike on the adventure, we get curious and we have ideas. But if we have ideas, we will run up against problems. And if we have problems, out into the field of consciousness, in other words, into the other dimensions of our existence, into that God force, that creative force, the questions get asked. How? Why? What do we do? What's next? And instantaneously, as a law of physics, those questions always get answered. It's impossible that they don't. And in the non-time space universe, as you have the question, the answer appears. Many different answers, because there's many different versions of us. And back through, I'm going to say the bottom of the toroidal field. That's not how it works, but I'm going to say the bottom. So the key to living in overflow is that we have to lose our concern about survival. That if we are made in the image of creation, it is assumed that we are meant to thrive. And in thriving, the irony is you can choose to pretend to survive because consciousness loves you so much it will give you anything. But when we transcend the need to survive, when we actually give up an interest in survival, and we're willing to not know the answers, and we're willing to actually align with the frequency through deep appreciation, through forgiveness, through personal connection, through just allowing ourselves to be served. I call it vulnerability. It's another key to receiving and living in overflow. By actually allowing ourselves to be vulnerable to others, not only do we let ourselves out, but the same mechanisms that let ourselves out to be seen by others are the same mechanisms when the door is open that we can let the entire universe in. So in our vulnerability, what happens in our not knowingness, in other words, in our letting go of trying to have it handled, we start to receive the answers. And I promise you, my experience of life is there are more answers than you could ever receive in one lifetime. And we have to be willing to get out of the way of all of those answers and how we do that. And I'm going to full circle this conversation just by coming back to this World Parliament, is by coming together, understanding that the place where we come together is that toroidal field. The entire universe is a torus, but each of us individually is a torus. And at that frequency, that is the frequency where we're one in our creativity. So imagine that 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It actually equals 11. And then 11 + 11 equals 1111. And then that 11, and we just keep, we just keep going. Actually, it works on the Nautilus frequency, on the pi frequency, but at the same time, 1 + 1 never made sense to me that it made 2. All of us together actually have the possibility to live in such overflow that there wouldn't be enough hours in the day to create what's possible based on the very contrast that's been happening in the world that's causing a lot of asking. So that's how I shift my thinking. It's the reminder that the more contrast there is, the more solutions instantly got created. And the only thing I become interested in is getting my frequency, my vibration, my self-feeling and my emotions to a place that is tuned to the stations where all of those answers already are. And my interest becomes, how do I live in the world of that third entity, creating upon creation and being inspired by all of the solutions that pour through me? And together we have the capacity to actually shift consciousness very easily if we should allow ourselves to be vulnerable to each other in that way. And that's why I love what you've put together here, Dr. Yugandhar. Thank you so much.